My own son left me at the airport in Rome without a passport, without money, and without a ticket home, and then sent me a message. It's your own fault, old man. You trusted too much. He thought I was a helpless old man who would rot away in Italy for weeks. But when Brian and his family returned to Portland and opened the door to my house, I was there waiting for them with a surprise. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. The departure board at Fiumicino Airport flickered with that terrible finality. Boarding complete. Flight. AA4782 to Portland. Gate closed. My gate. My flight home. I stood at the check-in counter, holding my phone with trembling fingers, calling my son Brian for the 7th time. Straight to voicemail. Again. The Italian security officer looked at me with that particular mixture of pity and suspicion reserved for confused elderly tourists. "Sir, without boarding pass and passport, you cannot proceed to gate," she repeated, her English careful and patient. "You have these documents?" "My son has them," I said, hearing how pathetic that sounded. He was helping me organize everything, and we got separated in the crowd. But we hadn't gotten separated. That was the lie I was still telling myself, even as the truth crystallized with brutal clarity. Brian had taken my documents, my boarding pass, my credit card, all of it. The helpful son juggling passports at security, saying, "Let me handle this, Dad. You're getting confused." Except I hadn't been confused. Not until everything I needed was suddenly in his hands instead of mine. The security officer's expression shifted from pity to concern. "You have money? Hotel?" I checked my wallet. 43 euros in cash. My other credit card was back in Portland, sitting uselessly in my desk drawer. "Not enough for a hotel," I admitted. That's when my phone buzzed. Not a call. A text message. From Brian. "Sorry, Dad, but you're the one to blame. Shouldn't have been so trusting. See you at home. Eventually." I read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. Each letter felt like a small, precise cut. Through the terminal windows, I watched the plane push back from the gate. Row after row of lit windows filled with people going home. My seat was in there somewhere. Business class, because I'd paid for the whole family to fly comfortably. Brian, his wife Jennifer, my 2 grandsons, all of them lifting off without me. The security officer was saying something about the U.S. consulate, about emergency services, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. I was doing calculations instead. 40 years as a logistics manager for Northwest Freight Solutions. 4 decades of solving supply chain crises, rerouting shipments when hurricanes hit, finding solutions when everyone else saw only problems. This was just another problem, a particularly personal one, but still solvable. "Accidental," my son had said when I'd handed him my documents at security. "It's so crowded, Dad. Let me keep everything together." Jennifer had smiled when she'd said it. That warm daughter-in-law smile I'd trusted for 12 years. I looked at the text message again. The casual cruelty of it struck me like a physical blow. But underneath the hurt, something else was forming. Something cold and methodical. 40 years of logistics had taught me to assess situations without emotion, to look at resources, identify leverage points, and execute solutions. Brian thought he'd left his helpless elderly father stranded in a foreign country. He'd calculated wrong on one critical variable. I'd spent my entire career turning impossible situations into solved problems. The security officer handed me a card with emergency numbers. I thanked her automatically, my mind already running through the list of contacts I still had memorized. Marcus Grant. We'd worked together for 15 years before he'd transferred to Rome operations. Last I heard, he was coordinating cargo flights through Fiumicino. I found a plastic chair near the terminal windows and sat down, watching planes take off into the evening sky. Each departure felt like a timer ticking. Brian had at least 10 hours before he'd land in Portland. Maybe he thought that was enough of a head start, but my son had forgotten something important. He'd grown up hearing my work stories, the time I'd gotten a temperature-controlled shipment of vaccines from Mumbai to Seattle in 36 hours, when the original route collapsed. The pharmaceutical emergency in Frankfurt I'd solved with 3 phone calls and a cargo plane. He'd heard those stories at dinner tables for years. He just never thought I'd apply those skills to my own family. I pulled up my email on my phone. The battery was at 40%, but that was enough. I started typing to Marcus, keeping it simple and direct. Then I opened a new message to someone else, a lawyer in Portland named Gloria Washington. I'd seen her advertisements in the senior community newsletter, specializing in elder financial abuse by family members. Urgent consultation needed. Returning July 20th. Suspect attempted conservatorship. I hit send before I could second-guess the word attempted. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Strip the old man of his resources, strand him, make him look incompetent. Then swoop in with legal paperwork about diminished capacity. The departure board updated. Another flight to the United States, but not for 6 hours, and I didn't have a ticket anyway. I had 43 euros, a phone at 40% battery, and a growing understanding that my son had planned this. The question was, how long had he been planning it? 3 months ago, on a Wednesday evening in April, I'd made spaghetti carbonara for the family, my specialty, learned from a supplier in Bologna during a business trip 20 years back. I've been thinking, I'd said over dinner, the boys should see Europe. I'd like to take everyone to Rome, my treat, a 3-generation trip. Jennifer had looked up fast, too fast. Rome? That's expensive, Clarence. I have the money, I'd said. I'd like to spend it on making memories. Brian had been skeptical, but Jennifer cut him off. Actually, I think it's a wonderful idea. Her smile had been bright, encouraging. The boys would love it. I'd been touched by her enthusiasm, fool that I was. Now, sitting in Fiumicino Airport with 43 euros and no way home, I replayed the last 5 days in Rome with new eyes. How Brian had consistently forgotten his wallet at the hotel, making me pay for everything. How Jennifer had photographed each transaction on her phone. For our memories, she'd said, but she'd been careful to capture the receipts, hadn't she? At dinner 2 nights ago, Jennifer had said to Ethan, my 7-year-old grandson, Grandpa's house is so big. Wouldn't it be nice if we could fix it up? But it could be worth so much more, Brian had added. That Laurelhurst neighborhood, Dad. Houses there are going for close to $1 million now. The look that passed between them should have warned me. But I'd been too busy being a grandfather, buying souvenirs, taking everyone to the Colosseum and Vatican. The memories came in fragments now, each one sharp with new meaning. Jennifer taking photos of me looking confused at a train schedule. Brian recording me on his phone when I'd gotten turned around in the Borghese Gardens. They'd been building a case, evidence of incompetence. The really bitter irony was sitting in a memory from 30 years ago. Brian, at 8 years old, learning to ride a bike in front of our house. I'd held the seat steady, running alongside him, promising over and over, I won't let go. I promise, son. I'd kept that promise then, run until my lungs burned, holding him safe until he found his balance. Now he'd let go of me, deliberately, in a foreign country, with calculated precision. My phone buzzed. Marcus Grant, my old colleague, returning my email. Clarence, are you serious? Call me now. I called. Marcus picked up on the first ring. Tell me what happened. But I gave him the abbreviated version. Marcus swore in 3 languages. Okay, he said finally, shifting into problem-solving mode. I have a cargo flight leaving for Cincinnati in 4 hours. FedEx. They owe me favors. It's not comfortable, but it gets you stateside. I'll take it. I'm also calling the consulate for temporary documentation. Clarence, he paused. Your son did this deliberately? Yes. Then you know what you're doing when you get back? I watched another plane lift off into the darkening sky. I'm going to solve the problem. After we hung up, I sat in that uncomfortable plastic chair and let myself feel the transformation from victim to strategist. For 5 years since my wife died, I'd poured everything into being the helpful father, the generous grandfather. I'd let Brian and Jennifer live in my house rent-free, paid for their vacations, their kids' private school, their cars. I'd wanted to be needed. They'd seen a resource, not a father, an asset to liquidate, not a person to love. The truth was sharp and clean. This wasn't an impulsive betrayal. This was calculated, planned during family dinners and vacation planning sessions, executed with precision at an international airport. My phone battery was at 32%. I pulled up Gloria Washington's website, reading her bio. She specialized in exactly this: family members attempting to gain conservatorship, elder financial abuse, inheritance disputes. Her tagline was, "Protecting your rights, protecting your legacy." Perfect. I had 36 hours of cargo flights ahead of me. Time to plan, time to think, time to remember that logistics wasn't just about moving freight. It was about understanding systems, finding vulnerabilities, and executing solutions with precision. Brian thought he'd stripped me of resources and left me helpless. He'd forgotten the most important resource I had: 40 years of experience turning disasters into victories. The departure board updated again. My son's flight was somewhere over the Atlantic now. In 10 hours, he'd land in Portland, walk into my house, probably start making phone calls about conservatorship. I smiled. Not warmly. My wife used to say I had a shark smile when I was solving a particularly difficult problem. "Marcus," I said when he called back with the cargo flight details, "one more favor. Can I borrow your phone to send an email? Mine's dying." "Of course. What do you need?" "I need to schedule an appointment with a lawyer for the day I land." There was a pause. Then Marcus said quietly, "Give them hell, Clarence." "I'm going to give them something better," I said. "I'm going to give them a lesson in logistics." The cargo terminal at Fiumicino was nothing like the passenger gates. Industrial, utilitarian, smelling of diesel and cardboard. Marcus met me there personally, a stocky man with gray temples and worry lines that deepened when he saw me. "You look terrible," he said, gripping my shoulder. 36 hours in cargo holds will do that." I managed a tired smile. "But I'll look better than Brian when I walk through my front door." Marcus had everything arranged. Emergency travel documents from the consulate, boarding clearance for the FedEx flight, even a thermos of coffee. "The crew knows you're coming. They'll get you to Cincinnati, then you connect to Portland. Total time, about 36 hours. "Perfect. Clarence," Marcus hesitated. "You're sure about this? Your son—" "My son left me stranded in a foreign country with 43 euros to my name." I kept my voice level. He sent me a text message basically gloating about it. "So yes, Marcus, I'm very sure." While we waited for boarding clearance, I sat in the cargo office watching families through the window. A father helping his daughter with her backpack. A mother buying her son gelato at a kiosk. Normal families. Loving families. I wondered when Brian had stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as an asset to be liquidated. Probably around the time Jennifer started whispering in his ear about the house's value. My house, the one I'd bought in 1995 for $180,000, now worth close to $1 million in Portland's Laurelhurst neighborhood. The house where Brian had his own bedroom with basketball posters, where I'd built a treehouse in the backyard, where I'd taught him to ride a bike. The house he now wanted to take from me while I was still alive. "Funny thing about loyalty," I said to Marcus. "You spend 40 years building it with colleagues, and it lasts. You spend 38 years building it with your son, and apparently it evaporates somewhere over the Atlantic." Marcus shook his head. "I've got 3 kids. Can't imagine." "Don't." I cut him off gently. "They're good kids. You raised them, right? I thought I did too." I pulled out my phone, looking at Brian's text message for probably the 20th time. Turns out I was wrong. The humor was coming back, that sardonic edge I used when crisis situations got complicated. It was a defense mechanism, my wife used to say. When things got bad, I got funny. Dark humor, gallows humor, whatever kept the panic at bay while I worked the problem. "You know what's really amusing?" I said. "Brian heard all my work stories growing up. Every dinner table crisis I solved, every impossible situation I navigated. He just never considered that those skills might apply to family situations. He underestimated you. Spectacularly." I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "He thinks he left a helpless old man behind. What he actually did was give me a 36-hour head start on planning my response." The cargo supervisor called my name. Time to board. Marcus walked me to the plane, a massive Boeing 767 with its cargo bay open like a whale's mouth. Inside, pallets were strapped down, packages sorted by destination. My seat was a fold-down jump seat near the front, typically used by cargo supervisors on international flights. Not business class, I observed. Not even close. But it gets me home before Brian expects me. That's worth more than legroom. The flight was loud, cold, and profoundly uncomfortable. But I'd spent the first half of my career in warehouses and cargo facilities. This was familiar territory, even if I was 67 instead of 37, and it gave me time to think. I pulled out the small notebook Marcus had included with the coffee, old habits from our logistics days, started making lists. Not emotional lists, but strategic ones. What did I know? Brian had my documents and credit card. He'd left me stranded. He'd sent that text message. And from the email I'd sent Gloria Washington, I was betting he'd already started legal proceedings for conservatorship. What did I need? Legal protection, evidence of his actions, a way to secure my assets before he could touch them. What were my resources? Gloria Washington, a lawyer specializing in elder abuse, my own 40 years of experience solving complex problems, and most importantly, the element of surprise. Brian thought I was stuck in Rome. He thought he had time to build his case, to position me as incompetent and confused. He was probably calling friends right now, talking about his poor father who couldn't even handle an airport. The mental image made me laugh, a sound that got lost in the engine noise. Let him tell that story. Let him build that narrative. The contrast when I walked through my door, fully competent and very aware of what he'd done, would be devastating. By the time we landed in Cincinnati for the connection, I had a plan. Not complete. I'd need Gloria's legal expertise for that. But the framework was there. Protect the assets, document the betrayal, and teach my son a lesson about underestimating people. The connection to Portland was another cargo flight, slightly smaller but just as loud. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. My mind kept working the problem, looking at angles, considering responses. Brian was impulsive with money, but clever with manipulation. Jennifer was the real strategist, I suspected. She'd been pushing this for months, maybe years. The trip to Rome had been her idea, originally. Such a wonderful opportunity, she'd said. Wonderful opportunity to get me out of the country and strand me there. I wondered what their next move would be. Call Adult Protective Services. Claim I was wandering confused in Rome. Use the photos and videos Jennifer had been taking all week as evidence of incompetence. It wouldn't work. I had Marcus as a witness to my competence. I had the text message as evidence of intent. And I had 40 years of professional references who could testify that I was one of the sharpest logistics managers in the industry. But they didn't know I had those things yet, and that was my advantage. July 20th, 11:30 a.m. The cargo plane touched down at Portland International with a thud that rattled my bones. 36 hours of travel, 2 continents, and one very clear mission. The taxi Marcus had arranged was waiting. Where to? The driver asked. I almost said home, but caught myself. Stop a block before Laurelhurst Boulevard and 42nd. I'll walk from there. During the drive, I called Gloria Washington from Marcus's phone. Mine had died over Greenland. Ms. Washington? This is Clarence Hammond. I emailed you yesterday. Mr. Hammond. Her voice was crisp, professional. Suspected conservatorship attempt? Confirmed. I have evidence. Can you see me today? A pause. I have an opening at 2 p.m. I'll be there. Good. Bring everything. Texts, emails, documentation. And Mr. Hammond, if you're calling from Portland, that means you got back faster than expected. That's correct. Excellent. I could hear the smile in her voice. I love when clients take initiative. The taxi turned onto my street, and my stomach tightened. There was an unfamiliar silver Lexus in my driveway. Expensive. The kind of car lawyers drive. Stop here, I told the driver, 2 houses down. I paid him with Marcus's euros and walked slowly up the sidewalk, just an old man coming home from a walk. My neighbor Emmett was watering his lawn. Retired police detective. Sharp as a tack. The best neighbor I'd had in 40 years. He looked up and did a double take. Clarence? That you? Morning, Emmett. But Brian said you were still in Europe. Said you'd be gone another week at least. His eyes narrowed. Said you were having some difficulties. Did he now? What kind of difficulties? Memory issues, getting confused. Said you'd gotten lost in Rome. Emmett set down the hose. Though you look pretty clear-headed to me. Interesting. Thanks, Emmett. We'll talk later. I approached my house carefully, staying where the old oak tree blocked the kitchen window's sight line. Voices drifted out through the screen. Clear case of diminished capacity. A man's voice, unfamiliar, professional. And with the incident at the airport, that was Brian. Leaving himself stranded in Rome is perfect evidence. Jennifer's voice sharp with excitement, shows he can't manage his affairs. The courts take these cases seriously, the lawyer said. With proper documentation, we can file for emergency conservatorship within the week. Then you'll have control over his assets. Control over my assets. They weren't just going after the house. They were planning to take everything. I pulled out my phone and took photos through the window. Brian and Jennifer at my kitchen table, with a man in an expensive suit, papers spread between them. All three faces visible, documents clear enough to read the letterhead. Then I walked up to my front door and rang the bell. The voices inside stopped. Footsteps. The door opened. Brian's face went through an impressive color transformation, from normal to pale to something approaching old cheese. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Dad, how? When did you? Hello, son. I kept my voice pleasant. May I come into my own house? He stepped back mechanically. I walked past him into the kitchen. Jennifer had half risen from her chair, one hand pressed to her chest. The lawyer, 50-ish, expensive suit, briefcase open on the table, looked distinctly uncomfortable. Mr. Hammond, he said, recovering faster than my son. Scott Miller, I'm an attorney, specializing in conservatorship cases. Yes, I heard. I looked at the papers on my table. Emergency filing for diminished capacity, based on my supposed inability to navigate a Roman airport. Dad, we can explain, Brian started. Please don't. I held up one hand. I have 40 years of experience recognizing lies. You're not even good at it. I turned to Scott Miller. Mr. Miller, does the Oregon State Bar know you're helping a client file conservatorship papers for a man who is demonstrably competent? A man who managed to get himself from Rome to Portland in 36 hours using cargo flights? Does that sound like diminished capacity? Miller's composure cracked. He glanced at Brian. You said he was stranded in Rome? He was. Brian's voice pitched up. We left him there. He couldn't possibly. He stopped. The words hung in the air. You left me there. I repeated it softly. Yes, Brian, you did. Deliberately. With my passport, my boarding pass, and my credit card. Jennifer made a small sound. Miller started gathering papers. I think, the lawyer said carefully, we need to revisit this case. Brian, I'll call you tomorrow. Mr. Hammond, I apologize. Save it. I walked to the door, held it open. Leave. He left fast. I closed the door and turned to face my son and daughter-in-law. They stood frozen, Jennifer's hand still at her throat, Brian looking like he wanted to disappear. I recorded your conversation through the window, I said conversationally. The part about leaving himself stranded being perfect evidence, all of it. Dad, Brian's voice cracked, I have an appointment with a lawyer at 2 p.m. Gloria Washington specializes in protecting elderly people from exactly this kind of financial abuse by family members. I glanced at Marcus's watch. That gives me 2 hours to shower and document everything, including the text message where you admitted leaving me stranded. Jennifer finally found her voice. This house is worth almost $1 million, and you're just sitting in it. My house, I spoke over her. My name on the deed. My money that bought it. Mine. But we've been taking care of you, Brian tried, by living here rent-free for 5 years, by letting me pay for your kids' private school, by taking a $40,000 trip to Europe. I smiled. Interesting definition of taking care of. I headed for the stairs. I need to shower and change. Don't wait up. Behind me, Jennifer started crying. Brian started making excuses. I kept walking. 36 hours in a cargo hold had given me plenty of time to think. My son had calculated that I was weak, confused, easily manipulated. He'd made a fundamental error in his assessment. I'd spent 4 decades solving problems that made his little scheme look like amateur hour. And now I understood exactly how to solve this one. After Scott Miller fled, and fled was the right word for that hasty exit, I stood in my kitchen with Brian and Jennifer, my daughter-in-law, who looked like she wanted to melt into the floorboards. Brian had recovered some of his composure, which meant the excuses were about to start flowing. Dad, listen, he began. Stop. I held up one hand. I have 40 years of experience recognizing lies from suppliers, trying to explain why shipments went missing. You're not even good at it, Brian. You never were. His face flushed. Good. Anger was better than calculation. Angry people made mistakes. Jennifer tried a different approach, her voice taking on that wheedling tone I'd heard her use with Brian when she wanted something. Clarence, you have to understand. We were just trying to protect you. You're getting older, and we thought... You thought you'd strand me in a foreign country, claim I was incompetent, and seize control of my assets while I was helpless. I pulled out my phone, Marcus's phone, technically. I recorded your conversation with Miller through the window. The part about how leaving me stranded in Rome was perfect evidence of my incompetence. How you planned to file for emergency conservatorship, all of it. The color drained from Jennifer's face. She actually stumbled back against the counter, one hand going to her throat. It was almost theatrical, except the panic in her eyes was genuine. You can't use that in court, Brian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Can't I? Oregon is a one-party consent state for recordings. I was present. The recording is legal. I wasn't entirely sure that was true, but neither was Brian, and his face suggested he was buying it. But more importantly, I have the text message you sent me. The one where you said, and I quote, "It's your own fault. Shouldn't have been so trusting." Brian opened his mouth, closed it. His face was doing something interesting. A sort of panicked calculation, like he was running through options and finding them all blocked. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I continued conversationally, walking to the coffee maker and starting a pot, have Marcus Grant as a witness. You remember Marcus? Worked with me for 15 years before transferring to Rome. He's the one who arranged my cargo flight home. He can testify that I was perfectly competent when I contacted him, that I coordinated complex international logistics, while supposedly stranded and confused. The coffee maker gurgled. The sound was absurdly normal in the tense silence. So here's what's going to happen, I said, pouring myself a cup. At 2 p.m., I have an appointment with Gloria Washington. She's a lawyer who specializes in elder financial abuse by family members. Fascinating specialty, really. Apparently, it's more common than you'd think. Adult children trying to seize their parents' assets before the parents are actually deceased. This is insane, Brian said, finding his voice. You're making this into something it's not. We were trying to help. By taking my documents and leaving me in Rome? That was an accident. Was it? I took a sip of coffee. Then why the text message, Brian? Why tell me it was my own fault for being trusting? That doesn't sound like an accident. That sounds like someone gloating. Jennifer started crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind she used to get her way with Brian. We just wanted what was fair, she sobbed. This house is worth almost $1 million, and you're just sitting in it. My house, I interrupted. My name on the deed. My money that bought it in 1995 for $180,000. Mine. But we've been taking care of you. Brian tried. I actually laughed. The sound surprised me. It was genuinely amused. Taking care of me? You've been living here rent-free for 5 years. I pay the property taxes. I pay for repairs. I paid $40,000 for a vacation you used to set me up. And let's not forget the private school tuition I covered for Ethan and Lucas. I set down my coffee cup. That's an interesting definition of taking care of someone. You wanted to help with the kids' school, Jennifer said, but her voice was weak. I did, past tense, and now I'm reconsidering every financial decision I've made regarding this family. I glanced at my watch. I need to shower and change before my appointment. I suggest you both think very carefully about your next moves, because Gloria Washington is very good at what she does, and what she does is protect people like me from people like you. I headed for the stairs, then paused, looking back. Brian and Jennifer stood in my kitchen like statues, frozen in their shock and fear. Oh, and Brian, one more thing. I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a pleasant smile. My wife used to call it my shark smile. You thought you were so clever, leaving your confused, helpless old father in Rome, betting I couldn't find my way home, betting I'd be stuck there for weeks, maybe months, while you built your case. I leaned against the doorframe. You forgot that logistics was my career for 40 years. Moving assets, including myself, from point A to point B under impossible conditions was literally my job. You might as well have challenged a chess grandmaster to tic-tac-toe. I climbed the stairs, leaving them in the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Jennifer burst into fresh sobs, and Brian swearing under his breath. The hot shower felt like washing off 36 hours of cargo holds and betrayal. When I emerged, I found my best suit, the one I'd worn to my retirement party, and dressed carefully. If I was going to war, I was going to look the part. At 1:45, I came downstairs. Brian and Jennifer were gone, probably regrouping, calling lawyers, trying to figure out their next move. Good. Let them panic. Let them scramble. I had an appointment to keep. Gloria Washington's office was in downtown Portland, a converted Victorian that had been tastefully updated. The sign outside read, Washington Family Law, protecting your rights, protecting your legacy. The receptionist showed me into Gloria's office promptly at 2 p.m. Gloria herself was a woman in her early 50s, with silver gray hair cut in a sharp bob, penetrating brown eyes, and the kind of presence that suggested she'd won a lot of courtroom battles. Mr. Hammond. She stood, shaking my hand firmly. Please sit. Tell me everything. I did. I showed her the text message from Brian, played her the recording from the window, showed her the photos of Brian, Jennifer, and Scott Miller huddled over conservatorship documents at my kitchen table, explained the deliberate abandonment in Rome, the cargo flight home, Marcus's help. Gloria listened without interrupting, her face professional, but her eyes sharp. When I finished, she sat back and steepled her fingers. Mr. Hammond, you've stumbled into a classic case of elder financial abuse by family members. The good news is you acted fast and documented everything. The bad news is they won't stop just because you're onto them. I assumed as much. They'll try to claim the text was taken out of context, that the conversation with Miller was just exploratory, that you misunderstood their intentions. She pulled out a legal pad. But here's the beautiful thing. You have multiple independent pieces of evidence. Together, with your testimony and Marcus Grant as a witness to your competence, it's damning. What do you recommend? Gloria's smile was sharp. First, we protect your assets legally. I'm recommending you immediately create a revocable living trust. This puts your assets into a trust you control completely, but it prevents anyone from seizing them through conservatorship. We'll also create a durable power of attorney, but not naming Brian. We'll name an independent fiduciary. How long? Paperwork ready by tomorrow, filed by end of business Friday. She made notes. Second, we file a police report about the Rome incident. International abandonment. It probably won't lead to charges, but it creates an official record. And third? Gloria looked up. Third is the nuclear option. You have every legal right to sell your house. It's your property. Brian has no claim to it. If you sell it, you remove their primary motivation. You also send a very clear message. I sat with that. The house. 40 years of memories. The place where Brian had grown up, where my grandchildren lived now, but also the house Brian was willing to destroy our relationship to obtain. If I sold it, I said slowly, how fast? In Laurelhurst? With the right realtor? A week, maybe 2. List it slightly above market for serious cash buyers. Tech workers, probably. Google and Intel bring in people with money and tight timelines. I thought about Brian's face when Miller left. The panic. The desperate calculation. How much time? I asked. Before he tries something else? Hours, maybe days. He'll find another lawyer, one less ethical. He might try to file an emergency petition claiming you're a danger to yourself. He might try to freeze your accounts. Gloria's voice was matter-of-fact. Your son is panicking, and panicking people get desperate. Then we move faster. I made my decision. Prepare the trust documents. Find me a realtor, someone discreet, someone fast. I want that house listed by tomorrow, sold within the week. Gloria studied me. You're sure? This is your home. My home, I said quietly, stopped being my home the moment my son sent that text message. Now it's just real estate, and I'm very good at liquidating assets when necessary. She nodded slowly. I have a realtor I work with, Bob Turner. He specializes in quick, quiet sales. I'll call him tonight. Good. Mr. Hammond. Gloria hesitated. Your grandchildren. This will affect them. I know. That was the part that hurt. Not Brian's betrayal. I'd come to terms with that over the Atlantic. But Ethan and Lucas, 7 and 4, who had no idea their parents were using them as pawns. Can I set up an educational trust for them? Something Brian can't touch? Absolutely. In fact, I recommend it. Shows you're thinking clearly, the opposite of incompetent. She made another note. We can set it up so funds release when they turn 18. Do it. 50,000 each. Gloria's eyebrows rose. That's generous. They're innocent. They shouldn't suffer because their father is an idiot. I stood. How much do I owe you? First consultation is free for cases like yours. Gloria stood as well, extending her hand. Mr. Hammond, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen a lot of families torn apart by greed, but I've rarely seen someone respond as strategically as you have. Your son made a serious miscalculation. Yes, I agreed. He forgot who raised him. He forgot where he learned to plan ahead. I moved toward the door, then paused. Actually, that's not quite right. He never learned those skills. I tried to teach him responsibility, strategic thinking, consequences. But he was too busy assuming everything would just be handed to him. Well, Gloria said with grim satisfaction, he's about to learn those lessons now. The hard way. I walked out into the Portland afternoon, feeling lighter than I had in days. Brian thought he'd trapped me, thought he'd left me powerless while he seized control, but all he'd really done was show me exactly who he'd become, and given me perfect clarity about what I needed to do next. My phone buzzed, a text from Brian. Dad, we need to talk. Please, this is getting out of hand. I typed back, You're right, it is. You should have thought of that before you left me in Fiumicino. Then I turned off the phone and went to find dinner. I had a busy week ahead. The next morning I woke up in my house for what I knew would be one of the last times. The thought should have made me sad. Instead, I felt liberated. At breakfast, Brian and Jennifer were already at the table. They looked like they hadn't slept. Morning, I said cheerfully, pouring coffee. Sleep well? Brian's eyes were bloodshot. Dad, we need to talk. Oh, I agree. I sat down with the newspaper. Look at this. Another story about someone trying to scam a retiree. Can you imagine? What kind of person does something like that? The color drained from Brian's face. Jennifer stared at her plate. Over the next 3 days, I played the role perfectly. Completely normal, which terrified them more than anger would have. Every morning, I'd comment on news stories about elder abuse. Financial exploitation of seniors is at an all-time high. Fortunately, I'm not naive enough to fall for something like that. Brian's nervous smile never reached his eyes. What they didn't know was that I'd been very busy. Tuesday morning, while Brian was at work, Bob Turner arrived. Gloria's recommendation, mid-40s, professional, quietly competent. Beautiful property, Bob said. Laurelhurst craftsman, well-maintained. This'll move fast. How fast? Listed at $895. I'd bet we have offers within 48 hours. Cash buyers, probably tech workers. Do it. But Bob, discretion is crucial. No yard sign, no open houses, online listing only. Bob nodded. Gloria explained, I'll be careful. By Wednesday morning, we had 3 showing requests. Bob scheduled them when Brian was at work. Wednesday at 11 a.m., a couple from Intel. Young, enthusiastic, pre-approved. They liked the house but wanted to think about it. Wednesday at 2 p.m., a Google project manager. California transplant, all cash, looking to close fast. She spent 20 minutes in the backyard. Thursday at 10 a.m., software engineers working from home. They walked through twice, measuring, planning. I watched from Emmett's house next door. This is the damnedest thing I've ever seen, Emmett said. You're really selling it out from under him? He tried to steal it out from under me. I'm just being more efficient. By Thursday afternoon, 2 offers. The Google manager came in at $880,000, all cash, 7-day close. The engineers offered $895,000, but needed 2 weeks. I took the cash offer. Speed mattered more than $15,000. Meanwhile, Brian was spiraling. I could see it in the way he paced at night, in hushed phone calls he took in the garage. Thursday evening, Jennifer asked, What do you think, Clarence? Pointing to paint samples. For the living room? Why are you repainting my living room? Well, eventually... She trailed off. Eventually what? Nothing. Never mind. Friday morning, I met Bob downtown to sign the preliminary agreement. Closing is Monday, July 28th, 10 a.m., Bob said. My office. Perfect. That evening, Brian was on the phone in the garage. Yes, I understand the fees. No, he's not actually incompetent, but we can make a case. I stood in the doorway. He didn't notice until I spoke. Any luck? Brian spun around. Dad, I was just looking for a lawyer unethical enough to file false conservatorship papers. I smiled. Good luck with that. Most attorneys prefer to keep their licenses. I'm trying to protect you. From what? Having control over my own property? I turned to go. Oh, and Brian, those paint samples Jennifer's looking at? I wouldn't buy the paint just yet. Saturday morning, Jennifer was browsing furniture websites, adding items to shopping carts. Planning a redecoration? I asked. She jumped. Oh, yes, just looking. Planning to buy all that furniture? Well, eventually, when we... She stopped. When you what, Jennifer? I sat down across from her. Let me give you some advice. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. And definitely don't start shopping for furniture to put in someone else's house while they're still living in it. Her face flushed. This isn't fair. Isn't it? I stood. From where I'm sitting, you've been living rent-free while planning to take my house. Those look like very different things. Sunday evening, I sat them down in the living room. We need to talk, I said. They exchanged hopeful glances. They thought I was backing down. I want you both to know, I said carefully, that I've given thought to everything that's happened. The trip to Rome, the text message, the meeting with Scott Miller, all of it. Dad, Brian started, and I've made some decisions about my future, about this house, about my assets. I paused. Tomorrow morning you'll understand everything. Family meeting at 8 a.m. Don't be late. At 7:30 Monday morning, I made coffee and set out 3 mugs. At 7:45, Brian and Jennifer appeared, nervous but hopeful. They still thought they could win. At 8 a.m. exactly, I pulled the folder from my briefcase and laid it on the table. Let's begin, I said. I opened the folder slowly, watching their faces. Purchase and sale agreement, I read. Property address, 4247 Laurelhurst Boulevard. Seller, Clarence Edward Hammond. Buyer, Sarah Chen and David Chen. The words hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds. Then Brian exploded. What? He lunged for the folder, but I pulled it back. These are legal documents. You'll want to be careful. You sold the house? His voice went up an octave. You can't. I did. Sale closes today at 10 a.m. Cashier's check for $895,000. All cash. Jennifer's face had gone white, then red, then purple. This is our home. No, this is my house. Your name appears nowhere on the deed. You've been living here as my guests. Now I'm selling it. You can't do this. Brian was pacing, running his hands through his hair. I'll stop it. I'll file an injunction. With what lawyer? I asked. Scott Miller won't touch this. And any other lawyer is going to ask uncomfortable questions, like why my son is trying to prevent me from selling my own property. Brian's face went pale. He looked at Jennifer, who had started crying. This is insane, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're proving you need help. Am I? I pulled out another document. This is a letter from Marcus Grant. He's written a detailed account of how I arranged emergency travel and managed complex logistics, while supposedly incompetent and abandoned. Brian's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. This, I continued, is a medical evaluation from my doctor. Clean bill of health. No cognitive issues. And this is a letter from Gloria Washington confirming I'm acting of my own free will and sound mind. Gloria Washington, Brian repeated. You hired a lawyer. Did you think I wouldn't? I almost laughed. Brian, I spent 40 years anticipating problems and solving them. Did you really think I'd let you take everything? Jennifer was sobbing. Where are we supposed to go? What about the kids? That is not my problem. You've had 5 years of rent-free living. Roughly $150,000 in housing costs you haven't paid. I'd say I've been generous enough. You're throwing your grandchildren out? Jennifer's voice was shrill. No, I'm evicting their parents, who tried to rob me. There's a difference, and you're not going to be on the street. Jennifer's parents live in Beaverton. You have friends. You have credit cards. Brian has a job. Brian's face was working through emotions, anger, fear, calculation, desperation. I'll challenge this. I'll prove you're not competent. With what evidence? I leaned forward. I traveled halfway around the world, arranged legal representation, sold my house, and executed an estate plan in 1 week. If that's incompetence, most people should be so lucky. The Rome thing? You mean when you deliberately abandoned me after stealing my documents? I pulled out my phone. I still have your text message. It's your own fault. Shouldn't have been so trusting. Would you like me to read it out loud, or submit it as evidence? Brian slumped into his chair. Jennifer was still crying. Softer now. The reality was sinking in. Why are you doing this? Brian asked, genuinely bewildered. You really don't know? I stared at him. Brian, you left your father stranded in a foreign country. You stole my documents. You sent me a gloating text. Then you immediately started legal proceedings to have me declared incompetent. And you're asking why I'm defending myself. I'm your son. You were my son, I corrected quietly. The moment you sent that text from the plane, you stopped being my son and became someone trying to rob me. And I don't let people rob me. Jennifer looked up, mascara running. What about Ethan and Lucas? Don't you care about them? I care about them more than you do, because I'm not using them as pawns. I pulled out another document. This is an educational trust. $50,000 for each of them, releasing when they turn 18. Money you can't touch, can't borrow against, can't use as collateral. Brian's head snapped up. You're giving them money but kicking us out? I'm giving innocent children a future their parents tried to gamble away. Yes, I gathered the papers. You have until 9 a.m. to pack and leave. Whatever you can't move by then gets donated. The new owners arrive at 10. One day, Jennifer shrieked, you had 5 years to save money, get your own place, build a life. You chose to spend those 5 years planning to steal mine instead. One day is generous. Brian was looking at me like he'd never seen me before. Who are you? I'm the man you underestimated, I said simply. I'm the man who spent 40 years solving problems, more complex than your little scheme. I'm your father, or I was until you decided I was worth more to you as a victim than as family. I stood up, gathering the papers. 9 a.m. I'll be at Emmett's house if you need me. I suggest you start packing. As I walked to the door, Brian called out, You'll regret this. I turned back. Will I? Let me tell you what I regret. I regret not seeing this coming sooner. I regret paying for a vacation you used to set me up. I regret 5 years of trying to be generous. I paused. But selling this house? Protecting my assets? Making sure you can't steal from me? I don't regret that at all. That's just good crisis management. I left them there, in the house they'd tried to take, sitting among furniture they'd never own, surrounded by paint samples for walls they'd never repaint. Tomorrow it would all be someone else's, and I'd be free. Tuesday, July 28th, 9 a.m. I stood in Emmett's driveway, coffee in hand, watching the chaos unfold at my house, my former house. Brian and Jennifer were hauling boxes to a rental truck parked haphazardly on the lawn. Every movement was frantic, desperate. Jennifer dropped a box, and china shattered inside. She screamed something at Brian. He yelled back. Their voices carried across the quiet morning street. Ethan and Lucas, my grandsons, sat on the front steps looking confused and scared. 7 and 4 years old. Too young to understand why everything was being thrown into boxes, why their parents were shouting, why their world was ending. That was the only part that hurt. You doing okay? Emmett asked from beside me. I will be. You did the right thing, Clarence. Your son's an idiot. Yes, I agreed. Yes, he is. At 9:30, I walked across the street. Brian saw me coming and his face twisted with rage. He dropped his box and stalked toward me. Come to gloat? He spat. No. I came to say goodbye to my grandsons. He started to object, but Jennifer grabbed his arm. Let him, she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse from crying. She looked broken, aged 10 years overnight. Hair unwashed, mascara smeared, wearing yesterday's clothes. Good. I knelt down next to Ethan. His eyes were red from crying. Grandpa, why do we have to leave? The question hit harder than I expected. I took a breath. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices. Your dad made some very bad choices. But Ethan, I want you to know something. I pulled an envelope from my pocket. This is for you. Don't open it until you're 18. Promise me. His small hand took the envelope. What is it? It's your future. A gift from me to you. Your parents can't touch it, can't spend it, can't take it away. It's yours. I looked up at Brian, who'd gone pale. Tell him. Brian's jaw clenched so hard I heard his teeth grind. It's money. For college. $50,000, I said to Ethan, in a trust with your name on it. Because you're innocent in this. You and your brother both. Brian lunged forward. You can't. I already did. Gloria Washington set it up yesterday. Try to touch it, and you'll be in court so fast you won't know what hit you. I stood up. You gambled everything on a stupid plan. You lost. But they shouldn't pay for your greed. Jennifer was crying again, that ugly, desperate crying that happens when reality becomes unavoidable. Brian looked like he wanted to hit me. His hands were balling into fists, releasing, balling again. Instead, he picked up another box and threw it violently into the truck. More breaking sounds. Careful, I said mildly. That's your stuff now. I don't have to care about it anymore. At 9:55, a silver Honda pulled up. Bob Turner, my realtor, climbed out, followed by a younger couple. The Chens, Sarah, and David, both in their 40s, dressed in comfortable weekend clothes, smiling nervously. Mr. Hammond, Bob said warmly, right on time. Shall we head to my office? I nodded, then turned back one last time. Brian and Jennifer stood by their half-packed truck, frozen, watching the new owners walk up to the house, their house now, with joy on their faces. Sarah was pointing at the garden. David was examining the craftsman details. The look on Brian's face was exquisite. Utter disbelief melting into horror, melting into pure, impotent rage. His face had gone from red to white to mottled purple. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't hold his box. His mouth worked soundlessly. Jennifer had both hands over her mouth, tears streaming, watching another woman walk through the door of what she'd called her house for 5 years. This can't be happening, I heard Brian whisper. This isn't real. Dad, this isn't real. But it was. It was gloriously, perfectly, finally real. Good luck, I said to them pleasantly. You're going to need it. Rental market's tough in Portland. At Bob Turner's office, the signing took 20 minutes. Sarah and David were delightful. They had a daughter starting at Reed College. They loved the neighborhood. They had plans for the garden. The previous occupants? Sarah asked. They were good to the house? They were tenants, I said carefully. The house is sound. You'll love it. Bob handed me the cashier's check. $863,000 after commissions and fees. I looked at it for a long moment, feeling the weight of 40 years of memories dissolving into numbers on paper. Worth it. No second thoughts? Bob asked quietly. None. Outside, I saw Brian's rental truck pulling away. Overstuffed, badly packed, lurching down the street. Jennifer was in the passenger seat, face in her hands. The boys were somewhere in back. I didn't wave. Mr. Hammond? Bob's voice pulled me back. Everything all right? Everything, I said, is exactly as it should be. I gave Brian life, education, a home, opportunities. He chose betrayal. Now he gets to live with that choice. That's not cruelty. That's consequences. I signed the final page with a flourish. The house was no longer mine. And standing there, holding that check, I'd never felt lighter in my life. Wednesday, July 29th, morning. My temporary apartment in Beaverton was small, 1 bedroom, furnished, month-to-month lease. The realtor had found it for me in an afternoon. It would do while I figured out what came next. My phone rang at 7 a.m. Brian, I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 7:15, again at 7:30. At 8, a text message. Dad, please, we have nowhere to go. Jennifer's parents won't take us. The kids are scared. Please. I wrote back, you should have thought of that before you left me in Rome. There are shelters. There are motels. There are friends. And there's an idea you might not have considered. Getting a job and renting a place like normal adults. Another text. You're really going to abandon your grandchildren? No, I wrote. I set up trust funds for them. I'm abandoning their parents who tried to rob me. Big difference. No response after that. At 10 a.m. I texted Gloria Washington. Thank you for everything. Send me the bill. Her reply came quickly. First consultation free. For cases like yours, personal satisfaction. Good luck, Clarence. You did the right thing. I smiled at that. At noon, I got an email from Laurelhurst Academy, the private school Ethan and Lucas attended, or had attended. Dear Mr. Hammond, we regret to inform you that Brian Hammond has an outstanding balance of $15,000 for tuition. As you're listed as a reference on the account, we wanted to notify you before taking collection action. I stared at that for a long moment. Brian had been using my future inheritance as a guarantee, had probably been telling people he'd have the money any day now when the old man finally kicked off. I called the school. "This is Clarence Hammond. I just received your email about the outstanding balance." "Yes, Mr. Hammond. We're sorry to involve you, but I'll pay it. Wire transfer today. But I need you to understand something. Never accept Brian Hammond's guarantees again. If he enrolls his children, it's cash up front, or they don't attend. Put a note in your system." "Mr. Hammond, that's very generous, but you're not obligated. I'm not paying for Brian. I'm paying so my grandsons don't suffer for having an irresponsible father. There's a difference." After I hung up and arranged the transfer, I sat on my small balcony with coffee, watching the Portland skyline in the distance. My phone rang. Marcus calling from Rome. "Clarence, how did it go?" "I sold the house, kicked them out, set up trusts for the grandkids. It's done." Marcus laughed. "I always knew you were the best crisis manager I ever worked with. Though I have to say, this is a hell of a crisis to manage." "Some crises are personal," I said, "but the principle is the same. Assess the situation, develop a plan, execute without emotion. And now? Now I look forward. I lost a house but gained peace. Good trade. That's the spirit. Listen, if you ever want to visit Rome again, proper visit this time, you let me know. I'll show you the city, right? I might take you up on that, Marcus. Thanks for everything." After we hung up, I opened my laptop. I'd been researching properties for the last few days. There was a small house in Cannon Beach, 2 hours from Portland. $350,000, ocean view, quiet neighborhood, simple. Nothing like the Laurelhurst house, nothing like 40 years of memories, but that was the point. New chapter, new address, new life. No betrayers, no manipulators, no one treating me like an ATM or an obstacle. Just me, the ocean, and whatever came next. I started writing an email to the realtor when my phone dinged. Another text from Brian. "Dad, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Can we talk, please?" I looked at that message for a long time. Then I deleted it. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. Some betrayals can't be walked back. Brian had made his choice in Rome, in that text message, in Scott Miller's presence. He'd chosen greed over love, calculation over family. Now he got to live with the consequences. I finished the email to the Cannon Beach realtor. "I'm interested in viewing the property this weekend. Can we arrange a showing?" The response came within minutes. "Absolutely. Saturday at 2 p.m.? I confirmed it and closed the laptop. Through the window I could see Mount Hood in the distance. Clear skies. Beautiful day. My phone rang once more. Brian again. I declined the call and blocked the number. Then I poured another cup of coffee and sat in the summer sunshine, planning my next move. 40 years in logistics had taught me one essential truth. When one route closes, you find another. When Plan A fails, you execute Plan B. Brian had tried to close all my routes, but he'd forgotten the most important thing. I'd been finding alternate routes my entire career. Cannon Beach, small house, ocean view, simple life. It sounded perfect. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.